A reading from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 8, verses 27 through 31. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea and Philippi. On the way he asked, "Who do people say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." What about you?" he asked. "Who do you say that I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels." This is the gospel of our Lord. Thanks be to God.
What do you call those bugs that are around in the summertime and early fall that make that annoying buzzing sound, the wow, 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 wow? Chris's first year of law school, she had never experienced those things before, and she was walking across the campus at Drake, and she heard those, and she called me just kind of worried because she thought that there was a power line down. She's like, "There's this weird buzzing noise. I'm worried that I might get electrocuted." I'm like, oh, those are, and I was always raised that those things were locusts. Oh, those are locusts. So instead of my wife being worried about a down power line, she was now worried about a biblical plague coming to devour her law school. Now, a lot of that fear probably had to do with your first year of law school. You always think the world is ending. It's what they do to you. They emotionally destroy you to prepare you for life in the legal world. But as it turns out, I was wrong. Those are not called locusts. And I've heard other people call them locusts, so it's not just my family. But those are, in fact, cicadas. I'm sure most of you know that. A lot of people think that cicadas and locusts are interchangeable words in creatures, but they are very different, very different. One creates an annoying buzzing sound. There's a different breed that every 7 years it feels like there's a bug apocalypse for 3 weeks, but mostly harmless. Now, locusts, however, are in fact a biblical scale plague. They will destroy crops, communities, everything you could possibly imagine. Now, locusts actually are grasshoppers. Once grasshoppers reach a certain population density, we're talking once they start swarming, they go through a change. They get smaller, they turn red, and they actually get the ability to fly. So clouds of locusts will cover the earth and devour everything and lay billions of eggs. So I was always raised thinking that locusts and cicadas were the same thing, but they're actually very different. Just as in the passage for today, I recently learned that Messiah and the Son of Man are two very different things. So the Revised Common Lectionary it starts out halfway through a conversation. So the Bible verses for today are a little bit more than what the lectionary says, because anytime you read a verse that starts with "and immediately he began" or "and then he said," whatever he's saying is intimately connected to the previous passage. So I added a little extra because you know how much I love my Bible. So in the verses for today, we get Mark's version of the Messianic proclamation from Peter. Jesus says, "Who is it that people say I am?" Like, "Oh, you might be Elijah, you might be John the Baptist. Who do you think I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus says, "Pshh, don't tell anybody." Mark's really interesting because he leaves off the proclamation of, "Simon, I now call you Peter, for you are the rock upon which I shall build my church." None of that. Jesus says, "Shut up, dude." And then immediately he began to teach them about the Son of Man. Peter says, "You're the Messiah." Jesus says, let's hold off on that. Let's talk about instead the Son of Man. Growing up, I always thought Son of Man was just another name for Messiah. But it turns out, if you spend a little time in the Hebrew Bible, they are very different. See, Peter was looking for a very specific type of Messiah. Messiah, by the way, means anointed one. Messiahs in Christ mean the same thing. Christ is just the more Latinized version of Messiah. They both mean the anointed one. And in the Hebrew Bible, you'd be anointed for being a chief priest, and Jesus fills that role. You get anointed for being a prophet, and Jesus fills that role. Or you get anointed for being a king. And that's really what Peter was looking for. Peter was looking for that Davidic Messiah. We want you to be like your ancestor, King David. We want you to pick up a stone and start whipping it at Romans. We want you to conquer. We want you to kill in the name of our people. That's why Jesus is like, okay, we're going to put that, what you understand as Messiah, we're going to put that on hold. Instead, we're going to talk about this whole term called the Son of Man. At the end of this passage today, Jesus almost directly references the book of Daniel. Book of Daniel chapter 7, it has this great saga of the Son of Man and how he shall return in the clouds in glory, almost exactly what Jesus says. But for the Son of Man in Daniel, there's some struggles. This is not the Davidic style Messiah. See, the whole context and history of Daniel is he's getting this vision. And in this vision, there are all these countries that are symbolized as creatures. There's a hawk, there's a bear, there's a lion. All of these things are symbols of these great empires. There's a ram. And these great empires are very bestial. They're very violent. They're very animalistic. And God says, no. My people aren't going to come like a ram or a bear. My people are going to come like people. So the symbol for God's people is now the human one, which is a better translation, but sounds boring, so we like to say the Son of Man. My people will be symbolized by the Son of Man. And in order for the Son of Man to rise again, because Daniel was written about the time in exiled in Babylon, it was written during a time of religious persecution. And he's saying the whole point of the Son of Man as a symbol for God's people is we don't fight. We don't engage in empire building. We don't conquer people. We don't commit violence. Violence is never a holy act. Instead, perseverance, endurance is holy. Don't give in to these base, violent urges, and God will lift you up and sustain you. So this is almost a direct rebuke. I mean, almost as direct as calling him Satan, which he does in this verse. So Peter says, you're the Messiah, and Jesus says, I'm the Son of Man. To further hammer that home, the Hebrew Bible has the phrase Son of Man 107 times. It's once in Daniel, and that's the one people go to because Jesus quotes it. But it's actually said 93 different times in the book of Ezekiel. I kind of like that book. I think you're all aware of that. But that reinforces this whole concept of don't go to war against empire. Don't do battle with worldly forces. God will lift you up. God will save you. God will rebuild you. The book of Ezekiel, again, is the first time we actually get the story of resurrection. Before Ezekiel, there was no promise of that. So Jesus is trying to prepare his disciples. You want this? That's not godly. That's worldly. That is you guys wanting your candidate to win in the election. That's you guys wanting your team to win the Super Bowl. That's you guys wanting something nice and shiny for yourselves. But that's not God's plan. That's not God's kingdom. That's a pretty heavy message. Mark chapter 8 is just this really fascinating chapter. It starts out with the feeding of the 4,000. There's a healing of a blind man in there, and Jesus does amazing big things in this chapter, and he's met with nothing but skepticism and condescension. After he feeds all these people, the Pharisees come forward and say, "We want a sign." Dude, he just gave 4,000 different signs. What were you looking for? Can you do specific requests? Jesus is not a cover band. He doesn't answer your hotline calls. No. And then after all of that, after all of these miracles, Peter does this great proclamation like, "I believe you are the Messiah. You are this great one. I acknowledge that you are a rabbi. I acknowledge that you are a prophet. I acknowledge that you have power that I cannot imagine." And then we get to the verses about Jesus talking about the Son of Man. And what does Peter do? He pulls him aside to rebuke him. That takes some chutzpah, doesn't it? Just the audacity of Peter. I'm like, hey, Jesus, I know that you just perform miracles, the likes of which the world has never seen, but you are absolutely wrong about your future. That's not what you're going to do. You're going to do what I told you to do. Peter has done something to Jesus that we all do in our own time. He tries to force God, he tries to force Christ, he tries to force church to be something that it's not. It just can't be everything we want it to be. We build up all of these theories, all these beliefs, all these theological constructs that just don't match what Christ said, what Christ did, what Christ has called us to do. It's harder than that. I think it's important for us, before we go on with this passage, to recognize some of these false beliefs that we've tried to build up, that we've played the part of Peter and tried to force Jesus to be something that he's not. We all have had those moments where we say, "Oh, God has blessed me. I have done something good, so therefore God has given me something and I have it now." That's true, but then we start taking that too far. "Oh, nothing bad will ever happen to me. Because God did something good for me, now bad things can't happen. Bad things happen to others because they didn't love God as much as I do. Bad things don't happen to good people because God would not allow that." We have these such straw man faith beliefs to help us feel comfortable, to stop us from being afraid of what life will have in store for us, because bad things happen. And that's not God not loving us. That's not us being at fault in our faith or lack thereof. That's just what it is. And sometimes we need to have those moments and remind ourselves of that, because we are emotionally unprepared for tragedy when it strikes. If we keep ourselves in that sheltered little place of God's love will protect me from all harm, we don't know how to handle it when harm happens. I don't know about you, but the past year, there's been a lot of harm. There's been a lot of frustration, and I've struggled. We've all struggled. But I've seen some people who just break under that struggle. I have seen faithful Christians who have just broken because they weren't prepared for this type of struggle. And from the very beginning, Jesus was very clear with us. If we follow him, if we listen to what he says, we are going to struggle. It is going to be hard, and we're going to lose something. That doesn't sound like good news, but I promise that it will be. Robinson, in her book, Eating on the Wild Side, she talks about how modern agriculture has domesticated so many plants and vegetables and fruits. And in that domestication process, we changed what they are. About 1 out of 4 people can't handle a bitter flavor. So the economic incentive here is to breed out the bitterness to most plants. But the problem with that is that bitterness comes from a lot of phytonutrients, as she calls it. That it was healthy when it tasted worse, and now that it tastes better, it's not as healthy. We bred out a lot of the health benefits from a lot of our fruits and vegetables. I think we see something similar happen to Jesus over time. See, Jesus used to be bitter and spicy, and over time we've made him a lot more easy to digest. This next passage is one of those classic examples because how we understand it in a modern context is very different than what Jesus originally meant with it. See, Jesus is telling us to pick up our cross and follow him. The modern context of that is, first of all, it's a prophecy of his crucifixion. Some scholars will say, like, oh, Jesus is predicting how he will die. And there's probably truth in that, being all knowledgeable, all knowing, and this cross reference definitely tracks with that. But there's something deeper to it too. We like to think that bearing our cross means those inconveniences that come along with discipleship, or inconveniences that plague our life. Oh, I have arthritic knees. These are my cross to bear. I got to get up early on Sunday morning and go to church. That's my cross to bear. We look at things we don't like as our crosses to bear. That's not what Jesus was talking about. No. See, Jesus was actually quoting hundreds of revolutionaries that came before him. See, the cross, before Christianity totally co-opted it, it was a symbol of Roman dominance. Rome had a whole bunch of punishments for various crimes. They can behead you, they can cut off a hand, they can imprison you, they can enslave you. Crucifixion was usually reserved for insurrection. If you tried to overthrow Rome, if you tried to kick Roman soldiers out of the place you grew up, they crucified you for that, and usually only that. Now, they wouldn't just do it, they would find a public place to display your body for as long as possible. They would find a crossroads and crucify you there. They would find a big hill overlooking a city. They'd crucify you there. And the most insulting part of this, and we see this happen with Jesus, is that they would make you carry your own cross. So, if a revolutionary was trying to have a Braveheart-style, last stand kind of speech, he would say, pick up your cross and follow me, saying, we are going to take on Rome. That we are going to fight Rome, that we're going to do battle with Rome, and we're either going to win or we're going to be crucified. So don't even worry about it. Pick up a cross, let's go. Jesus was calling people to a radical kind of action. He was calling people to challenge the beliefs of this world, challenge the beliefs of their faith, challenge the beliefs of those around them. It's not a simple bearing of inconvenience. This is something that it is an invitation to radical change in their community. We don't like to do that. We would rather just have it being, oh, my arthritic knees. Jesus wanted us to change, not just ourselves, not just who we are and how we think. He wanted us to change the entire world. In the ancient Jewish view, the entire world was Rome. That Rome had control of every aspect of their life. So Jesus is saying, let's go after Rome, but not in the classic way. Not in the, oh, we're going to commit violence kind of way. He's saying, follow me, follow my way. My way is going to lead to the cross. But this is this whole like, oh, what do you have if you inherit the world but lose your life? What can give you life? What can you gain? This is his way of saying, if you don't pursue my way and my way of life, what do you really have? They're gonna chip away at you. Oh, you can't worship on this day. Oh, you can't worship in that place. Oh, you can't live there anymore. Or, oh, you have to go over here and do this. Oh, you have to believe that. They chip away at your beliefs. They chip away at who you are. till eventually you've lost it all. So you can either take a stand, or you can die a death by 1,000 cuts. Jesus wants people to take that moral stand for the salvation of not just themselves, but the world. And he finishes with this reference of the Son of Man coming in glory again, that Daniel verse. It is this whole combination of these three passages that we've been talking about. Jesus knows that they want the Davidic Messiah. Who is it that you say I am? We think you're the Messiah. Shh. Let me tell you about the Son of Man. The Son of Man is there for endurance. The Son of Man is there to just live while empires rise and fall. The Son of Man will be lifted up. But if you're going to be part of that, you have to help make it happen. You have to be part of what we're doing. And that means you have to make that choice. You have to take action. Action will have consequences. But in the long run, it's going to be good. That's something very different than bearing the inconveniences of Christian lifestyle. It's that call to radical transformation of God's creation, of resurrection, of reclamation, not just of ourselves, but of our neighbor and of the world itself. Jesus was a pretty hardcore dude. If you go back and actually read Scripture and what it meant originally, Jesus is this radical that's really hard to follow, really hard to take. But that's where the life is. Just like with Joe Robinson's bitter herbs bringing us health and longevity, the true Christ is going to be hard to swallow, but he's the only way of life.